Recording in progress. Okay. So may I tell you now about my cases and what I've learned?
Yeah.
September 1979, my first case assigned to me at my first job. I call him Little Brian. He had just gotten into first grade, and the school referred him to the clinic. Why? Well, because he was lying and was disrespectful. And what was the situation? The situation was that it was the beginning of the school year, first grade. The teacher goes around and asks the kids what they did over the summer. And little Brian says that for part of the summer, he stayed with President Reagan, who took care of him and gave him lunch every day. Now, the teacher was terribly offended by this because, first of all, it's against the rules of the school to be a liar. And number two, the teacher said, the office of the presidency should never be associated with lying in any way. So this tells you how long ago that was. When Brian was 3, his main caretaker, his father, took him outside to play in front of the building in the Bronx. And the dad saw an elderly senior citizen being mugged, and the father began to run after the mugger, and he collapsed and died right there on the street, suddenly and unexpectedly, right in front of Brian. So when he got to first grade and the teacher asked him, what'd you do? He made some stuff up. But he made up something that was meaningful to him. I went to the current father figure of our nation, and he took good care of me. And he gave me lunch. He was my caretaker while I stayed there at his house. There was a real meaning to the thing that he made up. So little Brian came in for his first session. He was accepted at the clinic. First I met with his mother, and then I had a half a session with little Brian. So he sort of looks around the office, explores my tiny little office, and he says, what's that? I said, well, that's a box that has the family dolls in it. It's got a mom, a dad, some kids. He says, what's that? I said, that's a dollhouse. It's a playhouse. It's actually a big house with some furniture in it that kids can enact whatever they want from their families. Oh, what's in that box? Well, that's a box of vehicles, racing cars, buses, police cars. And he goes around, he asks about everything. I tell him, and that's our session. He leaves. I didn't hear his voice again. He came into the next session, session number 2. He walks right by me when I open the door. He doesn't look at me. He doesn't say hello. He doesn't make eye contact. He walks right by me, goes to the box that has the vehicles in it, pulls out the fire engine and the ambulance, holds them in his hand, walks over to the box that has the dolls in it. He takes the daddy doll. Then he walks over to the playhouse, to the, the, what do you call it? The house where you do,
Dollhouse.
the dollhouse, right? He puts the daddy doll on the top of the house. Then he takes the two vehicles. He gets down on his hands and knees, goes to the corner of the office, and begins the journey of the ambulance and the fire engine around the very perimeter of the floor. Woo, 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 woo. Slowly making the long trip around the molding of the office. And then after about almost a minute, he makes it around, is facing the dollhouse, which apparently is on fire. He gets up, he knocks the daddy doll off of the house. Too late. Takes the daddy doll, puts it back on top of the house, grabs the ambulance and the fire engine, goes back to the starting point. He did the ambulance sounds much better than I. He did them as if he had heard them since childhood. Woo, woo. He had the sound of the ambulances and could recreate them. It was remarkable. He comes around, makes the last turn. Takes the daddy doll, puts it on top, and begins again. I'm a new therapist. This is my first case. I came into the field to help children, and so far I'm not doing anything, but I'm sure we'll get to it soon. He's playing, and I'm not doing anything, but I don't really know what to do. So I'm sitting there. This is me. I'm now going to role play me. I figure, as all new therapists figure, that he doesn't trust me yet. And that when he trusts me more, he'll begin talking with me about what's on his mind. And I've been told that he lost his father, and that that's probably what we should be talking about. But in the meantime, I'm not doing anything, but I'm patiently giving him some time to start to trust me more and build a rapport. But every week I open the door, week after week, I open the door. He doesn't look at me. He doesn't say hello. He doesn't make eye contact. He quickly goes right to the box with the vehicles, reaches over and grabs the daddy doll, puts the daddy doll on the dollhouse, gets on the floor. By the 10th week, I'm in a panic because I know that they're going to take my first paycheck away from me. I didn't deposit it because I knew that I would have to return it because I'm not doing anything. I'm supposed to be like a therapist kind of a person, and I'm not. This is going terribly. I couldn't even tell the supervisor there because I knew that that would make my evaluation go way down, and I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to fail out of like a kid failing out of college, that they're going to fire me for incompetence. And in my family, that would be sort of embarrassing. So to fail out of college as a therapist. So I I waited, and every week, despite my horrible feelings of not being a good therapist and not doing anything to help the child, this is what I did. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and I went for some modern analytic supervision, because like months had passed now and the kid hadn't spoken to me yet and didn't seem to be making any progress either. However, I get a call from the teacher. She says, Brian's doing great. She said, not only has he stopped lying, he's not disrespectful at all, but he's talking in class and he's making sense. He's not like psychotic. He seems to be okay, and he's not causing a problem. I check in with his mother. His mother says, he's getting along a little better with his two siblings, because they were at each other's throats before this, and it's quieter. It's quieter. I remember the teacher said, you must have given him some good talking to, because he stopped lying after that. So I thankfully get the message that he's doing better. So the therapy is not ruining him. But I checked with a modern analytic supervisor. Therapist says, the supervisor says, well, does he want any contact with you? I said, I don't know. He says, well, does he say hello when he comes in? I said, no. Does he make any eye contact with you when he comes in? I said, not at all. He hasn't looked at me once yet. He said, well, what about his body language? Does his body language indicate that he really wants some contact with you? Like, does he sort of look over in your direction while he's playing? I said, absolutely not. But I feel terrible. I'm doing a terrible job. Shouldn't I be doing something? Supervisor says, you're doing something. He's working, and you're not interfering with his working. Stay out of his way. The kid is working. He's working intensely. I said, but he's not talking about what he's supposed to talk about. So he says kids work on their problems in all sorts of different ways. A lot of those ways are camouflaged, indirect ways. This kid's working on his trauma incredibly intensively. Stay out of his way. So I shouldn't say anything. No. So I shouldn't interpret to him your play is reflecting what's happened in your own life. You've lost the daddy doll like you've lost your father. No, don't do that unless you want to get rid of the case. Anytime you want to get rid of the case, make interpretations. You get rid of the case pretty quickly. I said, I'll keep that in mind, but so far I don't want to get rid of the case. He says, the case is going great. The rest of the school year, the kid finishes first grade, and that is all he's done every single week. And he's never looked at me or said anything to me. I figure his family went away for the summer, and they sent him to 2 weeks of the Fresh Air Fund camp. So he went away to that. I figure when he comes back in September, that's where we'll dig into the therapy. I had forgotten what the supervisor said over the summer. So the kid comes back in September, first session. He's now in second grade. I open up the door. He walks right past me. No hello, no eye contact, grabs the vehicles. Woo, 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 woo. He does that for the entire second year. Meanwhile, I'm in touch with the teachers and his mother. The teachers say he's thriving. That while he was seen as being a low IQ kid, that was the assessment, and he was immediately placed in special ed. He's now at the top of his special ed class, and he's the kid they're going to move into the inclusion where he has some time during the school day where he's with his special ed peers, and then parts of the day where he's in another class with regular ed peers. They're very pleased, and he's reading on grade level. So that's encouraging. The mother says he's talking, he's eating okay, he's sleeping okay, he's not causing a fuss, gets along okay with his siblings. In fact, he seems to like his older brother. The whole school year goes by, doesn't say a word. I'm trying to count what I'm doing in the sessions is I'm trying to think of how many times I've seen this story of loss being told. Let's see, if it's 1 minute to tell the story, to go around the room with the vehicles, and it's 45 minutes, let's say 40 minutes, that's 40 times a week. So far, it's been 2.5 years. That I found myself doing math, trying to figure out the numerical value of the sessions. In other words, I was losing my mind. Then he does this for the entire third year of sessions as well. After 3.5 years, middle of winter, he comes in. I open the waiting room door and he's standing right in front of the door when I open it. And his hands are like this with his winter coat on and his hood on. And he says, "Don't ask what it's like walking all the way from the other buildings over here to the clinic without any gloves on." Now, in Jewish, when someone says "don't ask," they mean ask. So I said, "Brian, what was it like coming all the way from the other buildings all over to here in weather like this without any gloves on?" He says, and he comes in and he pulls up a chair on the corner of my desk. And he says, "Can we play chess?" Where's my Brian? Who stole my Brian and replaced him with an alien? What do you mean, can we play? Yes, I guess we can play chess. No, checkers. I'm sorry. Did I say chess? Checkers. And he grabs the checkerboard instead of the vehicles. And he opens up the box. And he takes the initiative. He opens it up on the desk. And there we are. We're sitting facing each other, getting ready to play chess. He says, "My brother taught me how to play, and I love it." So I say, "Should we set up the pieces?" He says, "Sure." And I start putting them on the boxes. He's not worried about that. He just lines them up. He doesn't put them in the boxes. Then he says, "You ready? Can we play now?" I say, "Absolutely." He takes his piece and he goes over to my pieces. "Mine, mine, 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 mine." And he takes all my pieces. He says, "I win. You want to play again?"
Yeah.
Sure. This is great. I heard his voice for the first time.
Yeah.
Mine, 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 mine. Well, for the next 3 months, we played checkers and talked every time. And then something happened. We hear on the news that President Reagan's been shot. He's still alive, but they're showing the event because they had it, they were videoing him walking to his car, and they had video of him getting shot and the Secret Service agent jumping on top of him to protect him. Next session, I open up the door. Brian walks in, doesn't say hello, walks right by me, walks right to the vehicles, grabs the ambulance and the fire truck and the daddy doll, puts the daddy doll on the dollhouse. Woo, 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 woo. And the rest of the school year, the next 2.5 months, loss of the father. Then in September, he's back to playing checkers and other games. We begin talking. He tells me what he likes about school, what he doesn't like about school, which teacher he likes, which kids he likes. He can't stand his sister. She's always bullying him. I continue to get reports from the school. He's doing well. He's on grade level. He's in regular education now, not special ed. He does some homework. It's on the right track. So I saw Brian until he graduated from high school. And I went to his graduation, and he got a summer job. Anyone have any idea what kind of job a kid with this history would likely be drawn to?
Lifeguard.
Right. He got a job as an assistant at the firehouse helping the EMTs, the emergency medical technicians, before they'd go out on a call. He would help them get all their gear ready so they could get there on time. And then the next summer, he became a lifeguard. That's right. That's the story of little Brian. I made some notes about what I learned. When a patient has been traumatized, telling and retelling the story for months or for years to someone who is listening and trying to understand is often the medicine. I learned that when a child returns to an activity or a topic repeatedly, that's the indication that that activity or that topic is meaningful for the patient. So that fits for a kid who's suffered in a family with domestic violence, and then their favorite movie is a movie that has a lot of violence in it, that they're drawn to telling you about that movie over and over and over again because it's so meaningful to them. And I learned how you feel the sessions are going is not a reliable indicator of how the sessions are actually going. Any thoughts or feelings, reactions, questions?
Dr. Rosenthal, how did you cope with this frustration being a new brother you're analyst, and it's like you are not working and properly as a therapist, and your work is not doing the right thing.
Yeah, it led me to find a supervisor who would support, who had a deeper understanding and could support this way of the child working, rather than my more superficial supervisor who said, if the kid isn't talking, you got to get him talking. I once had a supervisor like that who insisted, you lock the door and you don't let the kid out until he talks about his anger towards his mother. That was a different kid and a different supervisor, but they were along the same lines. You had to see concrete results, and you had to see those results now. So I had to get, I knew about modern analysis, and so I had to get some consultations, and that led me to have modern analytic supervision forever.
Dr. Rosenthal, I believe, thank you for telling this powerful story, but I do believe he was communicating through the sounds of the mimicking of the ambulance noise.
Yeah.
To me, that was a symbol of his communication, and that was like for me, as I was listening to you tell the story, was his way of saying, I'm in pain. I'm, through the sound of the ambulance. That was his way of communicating, I think, his trauma.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
So he was communicating.
He was.
Yeah.
And we know that when there's been a trauma, if it's a specified event, the smells or the sounds or the colors can register as an ongoing trigger. I wonder what it was like for him in the Bronx, always hearing the sirens and the fire engines and the ambulances.
Oh, so he lived in the Bronx. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you're right. I was too nervous as a brand new child therapist. I was too nervous to be aware of that on my own. I needed someone to explain it to me.
Mm-hmm. And also the constant movement of the father. I forgot how you explained it.
It was
But there
knocked
was,
down off of the dollhouse.
right, but that was a repetition. I forgot what we call it in psychoanalytical work. It was like a repetition of, the fire siren and the movement of the father. Both of those were symbols to me of where his trauma lied.
Yes.
So he was traumatized probably by his father's loss.
That's the thing he focused on every single session for 4 years.
Wow.
Question might be too hypothetical, but I'm wondering, with this case, if you were getting reports from like the teachers and parents that he was not doing better or even doing worse, would that, like, how might that change, what you were doing with him?
Well, then I'd have to ask, is there something more that I should be doing in the sessions? Are the sessions being as helpful as they could be? I have found over the years that if the holding environment, which of course is different for every kid, if the holding environment is accurately created to meet the needs of the kid at this stage, we see some positive change very quickly. Even within a month, we see something shifting. It might not be some problem behavior that we're worried about disappearing, no, but we might see that the kid makes a friend, or that the kid is sleeping a little better, or that the medications, which were not being too effective, somehow are more effective. So I would ask, if is there something about the holding environment that I'm creating that might be missing something? And I'd bring that to supervision. Maybe we could figure that out. That's what I would do. And then what I would do differently if he was getting worse, I don't know. I would get as much information as I could from the teachers, as detailed as possible. So like when the teacher says, oh, he's always talking in class, I would want to know what she means by always. Maybe that means constantly without stop, or maybe it means twice an hour. I want to get some idea, because sometimes when the teacher is upset, like when I was upset, I couldn't see things clearly in the sessions. If the teacher has a whole bunch of kids who can't sit still in the special ed class, it would be good for me to get more details. So if she says that he's constant without stop disrupting the class, that she might say, oh, he's always doing it. But she might also say he's always doing it, meaning that every day, 2 or 3 times. So that'll help me to measure if things are going to be improving or not. So I get as much details from the mother, from the teacher, from the paraprofessional in the class, from the after school program.
I'm also curious about the the segment of where he starts playing checkers with you, and he grabs the checkers and says, "This is mine."
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that President Ronald Reagan was shot. I remember that date, and it did some trauma within myself too. I'm just curious, was Ronald Reagan symbolic of something with his father, and it brought him back to the trauma of his father when Ronald Reagan was shot? That's
Yeah.
it. That's a very interesting. Yeah.
And 4 years before that, what did he tell the teacher that he did over the summer?
Oh, he was talk to the president or something.
He went to the president's house and stayed there for the summer, and the president took care of him. President Reagan took care of him and gave him lunch every day.
So he wasn't lying. He was telling the truth.
No,
Oh,
he was making stuff up. He didn't really go to the White House, but it showed even then that in the absence of his father, that the person we had elected here in the United States to be the father, the parent figure of the nation, president, that had special meaning for him. It represented a real father figure.
Wow.
And so then when his father figure, his distant father figure over in Washington, D.C. got shot, it really, really re-triggered losing his biological father. So Ronald Reagan, I guess, was his distant adoptive father.
Yeah.
The father of the country, who's supposed to be powerful, somebody must have told them what a president does, and what it means to have a president. For a president, somebody who protects everyone. And he must have a really high view of his own father, just like the president Reagan.
Mhm.
Yeah, I so moved by this story,
Yeah.
and I was thinking at one moment, the way you just kind of like sat there with him, although you didn't say anything. Maybe he felt that the presence of another Reagan-like figure, president-like figure, who's just not doing anything, saying anything, but who's protective. He had that innate trust in him, I think, and I think this story is so moving because I think we all have that the power to overcome our own traumas if we were a given chance. I mean, he could not have done that at home by himself, right? I think it was very necessary that he was with you, and he didn't say anything to you, but he has trusted in you. It's kind of, yeah, it's.
While he told the story, I didn't say to him, enough is enough. Let's do something else. I permitted him to tell his story. I think I figured out it was 17,000 times, and that I was the witness. He let me be the witness to the horror. And that's something that we've learned about trauma, that
Yeah.
if there's someone can witness it, that helps with the healing.
And it's your first client, so I'm thinking you remember it better than anything else. But the way you said it to us, it was like I feel like I've seen a play. The way Brian expressed himself was so theatrical. It couldn't be better. I don't think he needed to say anything because he's said everything to you over and over.
Yeah.
And I feel like the way you just kind of swiveled yourself around, it's like, okay, that's like I feel like days of our lives. It goes. It's still moving. Like the siren sounds are still happening. Father died. You were kind of like sort of symbolizing the flow of time. And maybe he felt that, yeah, and just letting somebody be. I think that could be the best kind of holding space environment. Just letting him, right? And it's so hard, even for me as a mother or a spouse or a friend. Sometimes when you see somebody going through something, you hurry it so much and you expect answers and progress and stuff, but you can't hurry any of that. That's what I felt listening to this story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I heard his mother once say, Brian, it's been 6 months already. We have to move on. Enough is enough.
But who determines that time?
Yeah, but he wasn't done. He wasn't done.
I was thinking of it when my middle son was about 4.5, his best friend's mother died in a bike accident. And so then Lars would come over to our house every day because his dad didn't know what to do with him. And they would play with their train sets. And they'd kind of be in the kitchen and I'd be, working on dinner or something. But I remember after about 6 months, one day, Lars turned to my son, Anders, and he says, Anders, did you know my mom died? And Anders said, yes, Lars, I know your mom died. And then he never said it again. It was like, I never heard him say it again, but it was something about the way my son just said, yes, I know. So I was thinking about that when you were talking, Dr. Rosenthal, just like really being with someone like that. I found it so moving also. And it reminded me too of just, I feel like my kids would come home. I don't know, I would just see them in these periods. They'd come home from school and they do the same thing every single day for
Yeah.
long periods, like year. And sometimes I'd have the feeling like I wanted them to do something different, or I wanted them to engage more, but I also just felt like it was their way, different things for different kids, of kind of just, regulating themselves after school. And so anyway, it was such a moving story. I'm so happy you told us. And I was also thinking, I've been struggling because I'm trying to get my LPC hours. I have one supervisor that's the Colorado supervisor that's not a modern analyst. So it's like, I go to supervision, I hear this whole other thing about how to work with people. But I finally decided to get a supervisor at Acap that I'm just paying, I'm not getting, because that's how I want to work with people. So then I have my Colorado supervisor once a month for the hours that I need. And I like her and everything. It's just not exactly how I want to work with people. So I'm just kind of feel like I'm just putting in the time. Anyway, really moving story.
We're very fortunate that we have found this more flexible, more protective approach to working with children and adults that we wouldn't have known about from supervisors in the larger mental health community. The modern analytic approach is a tiny, tiny little slice of the mental health community. It's minuscule. So I think we're fortunate to be at Acap.
Dr. Rosda, I'm curious to know if the little Brian felt safe enough right away with you, because the way you welcome him and explain the toys and show the boxes and just convey that you can play here whatever you want to. Maybe it's something like that.
Right. You can play here. Yeah. Which really translates into you can do your work here.
And the big Brian ever talk about the little Brian? He ever explain why he played like that in the first session? No.
No. He never referred back to that. I don't even know if he would remember that he did that, which sounds a little nuts because he did it every week, but he was so busy working. And another thing I've learned is that children are always working on their traumas, always. They may not be discussing it, and they may be playing or using the office materials in some way that doesn't make it clear, doesn't make it apparent that they're working. It may be a mystery to us what they're working on, but they're working. And mostly it's our job to stay out of the way. Sometimes they need us to join in with the work. Brian didn't need that. He needed me to witness the work. But other kids need us to join in and be part of the play, but it's not really play, it's work. They need other characters to be working on their issues. But they're always working on issues whether we understand it or not.
So Dr. Rosenthal, you just helped me to understand, because you role played your movements with your chair.
Yeah.
And when I was watching your role playing, it was almost like unconsciously your body or your nodding, a movement of your chair where you were saying to Brian, I'm here with you, but you didn't say it in words, but you're just moving your body. So there was probably a counter transference going on, maybe within Brian, where you would like symbolize the father as, you know, you're the therapist and you're helping him to release the pain of the trauma of his father. So, because then you said he started talking. So here you are, and he's talking to you, and let's go play checkers. So you played I think a tremendous role just by sitting in the chair and moving around. It was like almost like you're saying, like you did before, I know, I know, I know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are ways we can use our bodies to let patients know that we're with them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we were attuned to each other, even though
Yes.
he never looked at me. That he knew, and that his posture changed after the father would die, and he would knock the father off of the dollhouse. We both of our shoulders went down, our heads went down.
Mhm.
We both went through the loss together.
Hmm.
And that was nonverbal. That's right. That was just something that our bodies would show that we were together on this.
Mm-hmm.
May I tell you about Ephraim, who was an older kid? Ephraim was in middle school when he came to me, and I was already in private practice. So instead of 44 years ago, maybe this was 24 years ago, like yesterday. Ephraim is from Ecuador, and his father also died. And it was so interesting. His mother worked in Ecuador. She worked as an emergency foster care parent for babies. So when kids had to be put into foster care, if they were babies, she would be one of the certified caretakers who would house several children, maybe 4 or 5 kids, babies, until a more permanent foster family could be found for them. So she often had babies there for as little as 10 days and maybe as long as 4 or 5 or 6 months. And when after her husband died and she came to New York, and she came to the Lower East Side, which which was a section that was almost completely Latino families, 90% Latino families and 10% Black families. She got the same kind of work when she got here. She was very resourceful, and she got work as the emergency foster care person for babies in New York City. And she got a big brother from the Big Brother, Big Sister program. She got a big brother for Ephraim, who was probably around 12 years old. That was brilliant. So the big brother who was assigned to Ephraim, he was white. He worked in a bank. And every Tuesday he would come over to Ephraim's house and take Ephraim out for 2 hours, and they would go to McDonald's and get burgers and maybe have a catch and then go home. The big brother thought that maybe a therapist would be good for Ephraim. He really wasn't talking much and had no interest in school, didn't do any work at school or at home either. any schoolwork. So the big brother asked around and somehow he got to call me. And he told me about Ephraim, and that's how we started. And he paid for the sessions too. So I never met him in person. We only talked on the phone. So the Ephraim's older sister traveled up from the Lower East Side of Manhattan on the train up to the office. It's about a half hour. And I open the door and Ephraim comes in and he sits down facing me. This is the opposite. He's looking at me. Looking at me, sort of like pleased or like happy to be there. But he doesn't say anything. I say, "You're Ephraim." I said, "I'm Dr. Rosenthal." How was your trip up to the office? I said, it's 6 o'clock. I imagine it was pretty crowded, rush hour. Is that your big sister in the waiting room? So this is the counseling office. I said, your big brother John, he thought we should meet. So far, let me interrupt. So far, what do we know?
He's not talking.
He's not talking. Is he oppositional? Is he negative?
No,
No.
Is he resisting being there?
no, I don't think so.
Does he want contact with the therapist?
Question mark.
Well, when I talked to my first supervisor about little Brian, he asked, well, does he say hello? Does little Brian make eye contact with you? The way that he situates his body, is he open to some connection with you? And I kept saying no to my supervisor when we talked about little Brian. So I had those questions in mind. He's facing me. He's looking at me. He seems cooperative enough, but like Mr. Brill said, he's not talking. He hasn't said anything. So somehow anything and everything I had ever learned in the prior 25 years, 20 years escaped me when I was with Ephraim. And I was a non-modern analyst. And here I am, I'm trying to get him to talk. I figured, I just haven't found the right thing to ask him about. But when I figure that out, he'll start to talk. I'll engage him in talking. So I continue for weeks. For a month and a half, I'm trying to think of what I could say or ask him about, or what's up with school. Then I realized that a lot of people, a lot of kids especially, they're not interested in answering questions. So if you can make it not a question, you got a shot. So I start to say, oh, a lot of kids have stuff about middle school that they like and a lot of things about middle school that they don't like. Figure by not having a question mark, he won't feel interrogated. Maybe that's what's turning him off to talking. But so I make it a comment and universalize it that kids have things about middle school that they like and they don't like. He goes, I'm starting to dread Tuesdays because I feel totally incompetent. I feel like I'm lost. I have no handle on this at all. I feel like such a loser. So I go to supervision, and finally, I have the courage to bring up a case in which I'm a totally inept, horrible therapist because I can't get the kid to talk. So that's why I delayed talking about it in supervision because of shame. But I finally bring it up, and the supervisor says, in modern analysis, we often allow our minds to wander when we're thinking about a case. Are there any images that come to mind or any fantasies or anything that pops up into your mind about this case or that has been popping up in your? I said, as a matter of fact, yes. He said, what is it? I said, I keep picturing tiny Ephraim sitting in a high chair in Ecuador in an apartment with 4 or 5 babies, all crying and needing to be diapered and fed and blankets. And I picture his mom working very hard and running back and forth into the kitchen, warming up the baby formula, testing out the temperature of the baby formula on the back of her wrist to see if it's too hot or too cold for that baby. And then rushing away and then changing the diapers here and then having to go downstairs to the basement to get the new supply of diapers that had been delivered and then unpacking it and then taking care of this baby and that baby and running back and forth hundreds of times past Ephraim. That's what I pictured. So the supervisor says, well, how do kids learn how to talk? And that turned the case around. Because how in fact do kids learn how to talk? You guys know? Yeah.
Parent talks to them, says out loud what they're doing when they're doing their diaper. I'm gonna give you your bottle now.
Right. Being talked to, being read to, listening to stories and songs with words. And I'm picturing him sitting in a high chair, and there's no human contact other than visually seeing his busy, hardworking mom doing a great job, but not talking to him. So if my fantasy, if the image I had some accuracy to it, if I was tuning in to something about his earlier life, then that makes all the difference in the world that he wasn't talked to. And so I started to use a tool that therapists rarely use. We read about it in one of Sydney Love's articles, but I started to use it. And why this tool goes out of our minds as therapists, and we don't think of it until someone tells us to do it, I don't know. If along the way, if you have any idea, but I started to just talk with him, to talk to him without asking him to say anything, because he's never been given the words yet. So Ephraim comes in, he sits down facing me, looking at me. So I decided I'm going to talk to him. I don't know what really to talk about. Ephraim, those 2 chairs over there in the office, over here on this side, they're going to be gone the next time you come to the office. Really? I said, that's right. He makes the face like, why? What's up? I said, well, teach, like I teach classes here in the office for therapists who are learning how to work with children. And there are 7 people in the class. And if you see where you're sitting is one chair, and then there's that 2-seater over there. So that's for 2 people. And then there's these 2 chairs, and then the extra folding chairs, 2 of them are over there. When you come here next week, those chairs are gone, and there's going to be a long couch, like the whole side of the room. 4 people are going to be able to sit there. The whole class will have a chair. Not bad, he says, non-verbally. I didn't ask him anything. I'm not trying to get him to talk. I'm talking. I'm feeding him words. So you came up on the train with your sister. You know, I don't really like the trains in the summer. You know, it's hot. You know, us therapists have to wear, you know, these are made out of wool. It's terrible. And it feels sticky and sweaty, waiting for the trains underground. There's no air conditioning. There's a million people. And then you know what I don't like? I don't like when you get on the train, you squeeze your way into the train. Of course, there's no chairs, but there are so many people standing up that often you're squished into a spot where you can't even reach to hold on to one of the poles that they've put there to hold on to, so that you can steady yourself as the train goes back and forth. There's nothing even to hold on to. It feels so shaky. I hate that. It feels shaky and insecure, and I feel like I could fall down at any time. And then I'm worried I'm bumping into somebody when the train goes this way or that way, and that they're going to be mad at me. And they're pretty sticky and sweaty too. Yuck. I just think of things that aren't too wildly inappropriate to put words to. And I just talk the entire session. I did that for 2 weeks. I get a call from the big brother. He says, I don't know what the heck you're doing in there, but this kid's talking up a storm at home. I said, what do you mean? He says, the kid's talking. I show up, the kid's talking to me. That hasn't happened before. And then we go to McDonald's for burgers. It turns out he doesn't even like burgers. He likes the fish-a-majig. And he orders it at the counter himself. So that was my feedback, that things are going okay. I thanked him so much for calling me because I wasn't sure about this experiment. But when you have the right holding environment, we want to see something shift, even slightly. This was a big shift. For the next 2.5 years, I just talked to Ephraim. And I'm getting feedback that he's doing better. And he's never said one word. I never heard his voice. He never said a word. He nods. He's cooperative. He's impressed. He's a little embarrassed. Everything nonverbal. But he's talking out there. By the 3rd year, so now he's like 15 years old. And he comes in. He says, I can't come in anymore. I'm glad he's saying something verbally, but I didn't want that to be the thing he would say. But he says, I can't come in anymore. I said, what's up? He says, well, I'm getting a job on my bicycle delivering stuff. There's a store in the neighborhood, and they said I could deliver stuff and I'd get paid. But they need me from 3 o'clock to 6, or they need me from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. So we meet at 6 o'clock. I can't come in. I said, what about coming in at 3 o'clock? He says, okay. And then he went back to not talking.
Just had to get the logistics out of the way.
He's not much interested in going to school. That has not been solved. He's not interested in doing work. He's in high school and he's not doing a damn thing. But this isolated, depressed, nonverbal kid got a guinea pig and is taking care of it. So he's made a human connection. He's got a guinea pig. And then I had guinea pigs as a kid. It was a nice connection to hear about that. Then he's got some uncle who lives on the Lower East Side also, who he's never spoken to. And somehow they're talking and forming some sort of a connection and a bond. And they're talking. So things are shifting, not school. School is not shifting. So, Ms. Muir, your question before about what about if you hear that things are not getting better. So things are getting better. The reports are that he's doing well, but not in this area. And he's telling the big brother he wants to drop out of school. So his mother says to him, and the big brother says to him, you either have to work or go to school. And that's when he got the job. But now he has the job. He's getting ready to drop out of school. But I don't think I have any leverage about that. So I talk about school. I talk about hating school. I didn't have to make up it. I didn't have to fabricate anything. I would talk about hating middle school and hating high school and feeling stupid and not doing well and fighting at home about doing the work, and it was miserable. And so I talked about that. I figured he could relate to that. His job ends. They don't need him anymore, but he kept it for a whole year. He kept a job for a year. His mother starts up again. You have to either go to school or work. You have to go to school or work. The big brother, go to school or work. And I ask him, well, I wonder if they'd get rid of you. What would happen if you didn't go to school and if you didn't work? I said, would your mom stop feeding you? He says, would your big brother stop visiting you? Of course not. I have a feeling it's not true. I have a feeling you could not work and not go to school and they could still take care of you. Matter of fact, I think you got a good thing going here. How did you do it? I literally have to work. I don't have a choice. I have to work. You've got this figured out. You don't have to work and you don't have to go to school. I'm very impressed. I joked with him, you could go around the country and give seminars about how to not work or not go to school and be okay. He would laugh. After 4.5 years, he comes in, he says, I can't come in anymore. I say, what's up? We've been through this once before a year and a half ago. What's up? He says, I signed up for a GED program and they meet from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock or from 2:30 to 5 or something like that. And I see you at 3 o'clock, so I can't come in. I said, how about if you come in at 6 o'clock? He says, okay. So we worked together another year or two. He got his GED, he got work, and it really felt like the need for him to come in from his mother and from the big brother, they were satisfied. And so the therapy stopped. And this is what I learned from Ephraim. When a patient is not talking, it's not therapeutic to try and get them to talk. It's much more important to study and understand what is making it difficult for them to talk. Only after we understand their silence can we know how best to intervene. And the same thing holds true if a patient isn't really engaging much, or isn't playing, or isn't cooperating. It's not important to get them to engage or to play or to cooperate. It's much more important to figure out and understand what's making it hard for them to engage or play or cooperate. And then I learned it's not important to see change or to see progress inside the sessions. The children will continue with the exact same pattern of interactions, like Brian did and like Ephraim did, for as long as those patterns and those interactions are psychologically useful to the child. As long as that kind of interaction is medicine for them, they'll keep doing it, regardless of whether they're making progress outside. They'll use that medicine as long as it's still helping. So really the best mark of progress is how they're doing out there, not if they're changing in the sessions. So these are two examples of kids who made no changes whatsoever inside the sessions for 4 or 5 years. And yet there were reports that they were doing much better. And often we can't do this work at all without input from parents and big brothers and tutors and coaches and teachers. We have to find a way to hear from them. Any thoughts about Ephraim, his therapy, feelings, thoughts?
I love the intervention with him not engaging with school, because I feel like that's one of the most, something that makes me very anxious as a therapist. And I feel like the school and the parents like put it on you to like be, you know, a miracle worker, that you'll be able to like suddenly get this disengaged kid to like, you know, sit quietly in class and do all their work. And I feel like I struggle kind of knowing how to go with the resistance of that, and like accept it and join it. And so I really liked the way, you know, you kind of like make it a skill of his that he figured out, you know, how to, all the other kids have to go to school. How did he figure this out? And it's very like ego protective and helping his self-esteem to kind of say like, you could be helping other kids with this. But I feel like that's something I get stuck on a lot with kids.
I had no leverage. There was no in for me to get him to go to school or to invest more in school. And Dr. Spotnitz used to say that if you can't beat him, join him.
Mm.
That's an old saying from hundreds of years ago, but he would use that if you have no way of winning this,
Mhm.
you might as well join him, and that
Mhm.
could help him.
Mhm.
The whole idea of silence being being bad, I think listening to both of your cases has helped me to understand that silence does not always have to mean that it's bad, because in silence, in both of your cases, it seems as if the clients were actually absorbing your energy as the therapist, so they weren't acting, showing any types of improvement in the session with you, but when they went out, it's almost like they were practicing or imitating what they were gaining from you. So there's an unconscious, I think, level of for maybe clients in therapy to absorb the therapist. And when you started doing all the talking and he's just shaking his head, you could tell like there's some yeah, somebody's actually talking to me now, and so what I learned from both of your cases is that silence does not always mean there's nothing going on.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's right.
yes, because I have a tendency to go into that role of being silent too, and I know it doesn't mean that I'm not absorbing. Yeah, so these were great cases. I love the way you role play.
Well, these cases are very much alive for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would it be, Ms.
Can
Moon?
I say? Yeah. I listening to both of these cases, I can't help but learning that that a therapist really needs to be very humble. It's with Brian too, you said how you feel about the session is not or may not be an actual indication, is how it's going. And with this case too, you're saying a change in the session may not be as important as change out there. That did it for me today. And I'm gonna apply this to something a little different. The image came to me. You know how like if you're a churchgoer, or if you're person of faith, or if you belong to any kind of good work groups, people want change, but not maybe change how you act in the church itself may not really be the indicator of like your growth of the faith. It's what you do out there in daily life, how you behave, or how you conduct yourself, that may be the fruit of what's going on, growing the faith or whatever. And it just, whoa, but people want to see change, the changes or improvement and progression within the session, right, within the church. And maybe we have to kind of let go of that too. I don't know, you couldn't make it, you could, because it's a professional setting, you'll have to come up with some kind of performance, right? You have to,
We're under pressure.
yeah,
Pressure to show progress.
yeah, and that's how you make money too, right? It's not a free work either. So
Right.
but how do you hold on to that? How do you keep it fresh? And not get into the mannerism of being in a therapy session where you think you could change everything or hurry the process and things like that. I think that would be a real challenge for therapists.
Mhm.
And the religious leaders, or even politicians and stuff.
Miss Hart, Miss Robinson, things okay? How you holding up?
Yeah, I'm just listening. Find it very interesting. But it's a lot of food for thought.
Too much?
No, I'm really enjoying it. Actually, it's yeah, very enlightening. So it's something to store for later.
I was just loving listening to the stories and made me want to see kids and silent kids. But I had this image of us all kind of sitting around the campfire listening to your stories. It was really pleasurable and felt like learned so much. And I thought, oh, storytelling is such a great way to learn. So
I think I've had maybe about 100 kids who didn't talk with me over the years.
wow.
So I expect that if you work with kids, you'll have some kids that are not able or ready to talk with you. May I tell you about Miguel before we finish for today?
Mhm.
I supervised a therapist working in a school, again on the Lower East Side. It was a middle school, and the principal got on board with the idea of having counseling groups for everybody in the school. So the school had 2,000 kids. Every Monday morning, second period was advisory groups. And every grown-up in the building ran an advisory group. The security guard, the lunch lady, the principal, and I worked at the school. I brought in 5 social work interns to run groups. So one of the interns, Samita, she was Indian. So she was assigned a group. The way they did it was it would be a homeroom would be divided in half. So 32 kids divided in half, 16 kids would go to one group leader, 16 would go to another group leader. So Samita had half of a homeroom, 16 kids, and it was going to be a counseling group. And I was supervising her. And the first day she has the chairs set up in a circle, and as is customary and is, I think, a law, the kids all came into the room, pulled the chairs out of the circle, and clumped together in other ways, but not in the circle that the grown-up wanted. So that's the official way to start a group of middle schoolers. And she took attendance because she had to keep track of who was there, like a teacher. And she called everybody's name, and each kid answered, "I'm here," or "If I have to be here, I guess I'm here." But when she got to call Miguel's name, nobody answered. It was silent. And then she sees that there's one kid who's not facing at all the front or the rest of the group or anybody in the group. Miguel, his chair is turned around 100%. His feet are up on a file cabinet. He's got a hoodie on and a cap, not just the hood of the hoodie. He's got the cap pulled down over his face, facing that way in the corner of the room, near the others. He's not geographically isolated, but his body posture is completely closed off. And she says, "Miguel," no answer. "Miguel." And then Tanya says, "That's Miguel." And so Samita asks Tanya, is is Miguel okay? And Tanya says, yeah, that's Miguel. That's how he is. So she's new. She doesn't know what the heck to do. So she continues, takes the rest of the attendance. They have their first meeting. It's a typical middle school group. Nobody wants to talk and everybody wants to talk. It's confusing, and they go to all different topics. When she asked what kind of stuff should we talk about this year, we're going to be together for the whole school year. But at the next meeting, Miguel again, his same thing, same posture, same hoodie, same cap, pulled over his face, no contact. Samita wants to know, what should I do? Should I reach out to him more? Should I ask him to turn around? You know, if I was a teacher, he'd absolutely have to turn around and take his fucking hat off. That's the law of the land. So I asked her, well, does he say hello to you? She says, no. I said, does he make any eye contact with you? She says, not at all. I said, does his body positioning indicate that he might be a little bit open to hearing from you? She says, absolutely not, just the opposite. I say, what does Tanya say about this? Tanya keeps reassuring me that he's fine and that that's just how he is. And she's not worried. I say, then give him space. Give him time, give him space. Don't intrude. He's telling us what he needs. She's not so sure about that, but she goes along with it, and she gives him the space, and she gives him space. And the entire school year goes by and he's never budged. She wonders if he's breathing. She tells me in supervision, she wants to hold a mirror under his nose to see if you can see signs of breathing. Maybe he's a statue. Then we get an email that the people who funded this counseling program to begin with want to come into the school. They want the group leaders to leave the room so that these women from the foundation can come in and meet with the children, ask them how their experience is, and whether they should fund this group counseling program again for the following year. So we have no choice. They show up at the prescribed day and time, and Samita has to leave. And these two ladies go in and have this focus group. And who the heck speaks first?
Miguel.
Miguel. He says, this group has saved my life. He says, if it wasn't for this group, I know I'd either be dead or in jail or in a gang. He says, but we talked about everything here. We talked about drugs. We talked about violence. We talked about abuse. We talked about school. We talked about drinking. We talked about everything here. And that's really good for kids, he says. So you should keep the program going. So this is what I learned from Miguel. Talking in therapy is totally overrated. That's what I learned. By the way, I'm sending you these notes in an email. I already set it up and I scheduled an attachment, so it should be arriving in 5 minutes. A patient can be fully present and fully engaged and working on their problems when they are not talking. Dr. Glenn, you just said that before. And we can no longer say to our supervisors, this patient is not participating in sessions. We can't say that. We have to limit our comment to say the patient isn't talking in sessions. It's still to be determined whether they're participating and engaged. And when you accept the resistance, it's good for the patients. Any thoughts about that short story? Yeah, Mr. Brill, Rabbi Brill.
A colleague of mine and myself, we did a group at the prison here in outside of Louisville, Kentucky, and we interviewed people to come into it. There were about 23. We interviewed 11 were in the group. And when this guy was being interviewed for it and was hearing about what it was going to be, he said, well, this is just a damn Ricky Lake. I didn't even know what he was talking about. He was talking about one of these, shows on
He was
TV.
a talk show host.
Yes,
Very
where there's an
dramatic
audience.
stories. Yeah.
Exactly. This is just a damn Ricky Lake. Well, the program director said, no, you should go in this group. It'll be all right. And we did something where we would like write up what happened in the group the week before. One of the therapists would do it and give it to the group. It was a way of being transparent or something. And this guy would wad it up and throw it away. He would sit outside the group. We never did anything about it. We accepted it totally. Over a period of time, he moved right into the group. Another guy would get him a big cup of coffee every time group was meeting, and he just came right in when he was ready. And it was just amazing. I had no idea what I was doing. It just occurred to us to do it that way, and it worked.
Hmm.
And it was a good group.
When we accept a person's unreadiness, that helps them. We can't always predict exactly how it will help them, but it's going to help them. There's something good about acceptance.
So I'll be very brief. I'm processing this, Dr. Rosenthal, through the eyes of analysis and also my role as a faith leader. There are many times in my role as a faith leader where I have to go into situations where I feel totally lost for words. And I'm going to use an example. Like for example, when you go to a hospital and a person dies at the moment you're at the hospital, and the family's in the other room, and I have to go and let the family know their loved ones has died. And I remember doing it many times where I would just come back from the bed for the deceased and go to the family, and I would just stare at the family and not say a word, but they knew their loved one had died. And then I would use this is pre-COVID, I would use my hands to comfort the people. So you took me to the role of what I do in my work as a faith leader, where you step in very, very delicate situations, and there are times when words are not necessary.
Yes. In fact, that's an example of where words might even be
Yes.
not good enough and might even diminish the moment. There might not be words to be with them in that profound way.
Yes.
Next week, maybe we can talk more about this fundamental idea that kids are always working on their problems no matter what they're doing in sessions. There's a nice case write-up by an author who really struggled and felt sort of lost with a kid who was usually playing basketball in sessions. I mean, with a sponge ball, and he was trying to make sense of the sessions, but eventually was able to develop an understanding. Maybe I can send that paper to you.
Okay.
So instead of reading the very complicated articles that are on the syllabus for this week, let me send you a replacement article. All right. See you next week. Oh, there's a week that we don't meet.
Is that next week?
for
It's next
spring-
week. It's next
That's
week.
next
Great.
week, yeah.
Ms. Robinson, is that right? That next week is a spring break?
I looked it up. I don't remember.
March
Let me just see.
17th. Yeah, it's a week from today.
Yeah, yep.
I'm getting this information from Ms. Robinson. That's why I'm double checking with her. Right, that spring break. So I'll see you after.
Yeah, the week
spring.
of March 14th.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks after the spring break.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you
thank
so
you.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosenthal.